Zach was just like any other kid here in our town. Went to public schools, played basketball here, City League, friends. He was always hanging with friends, always at their house. They were here, spending the night, just living it up, laughing, having fun.
He's a good friend to have. If I was down, he's gonna be the first person to come up to me and ask me what's wrong.
Zack was one of a kind, full of love, always smiling, gave the best hugs. When he was the happiest is when he was given to people, and when he was around people. He wanted to see the good in everybody, and he wanted everybody to just see the good in him.
He was always polite and gentle, and I think at the parties he would go to, the kids said that he kind of kept things energized a lot.
I do remember when Zack got sick because he was working for us at the time, and he was coughing a lot. And we thought also, he did sound like he had bronchitis or the flu or something like that.
The days leading up to the hospital visit, he was complaining of some nausea, vomiting, he had a cough. He had called me and decided, okay, I need to go to the urgent care while I was at work. And I could hear it in his voice. His voice just did not sound right. It sounded like he was having trouble enunciating his words. And when I got there, he was in the recliner and immediately knew this was a life-threatening emergency because he was blue. I chose to stay with him that night in ICU. They had him just short of being intubated, having a breathing tube put down in his lungs. They had him on a machine that was called BiPAP. He was anxious because even with that, he couldn't breathe. The alarms were continually going off. His heart rate kept shooting through the roof. His oxygen level kept bombing out. He was struggling.
When I talked to his mom, it was like, he might be out for 2 or 3 months, and I was like, that's fine, just get him better, and when he's better, he can come back to work, and, when we can see him, we'll go see him, and then everything just went downhill from there.
They had to intubate Zack. They had to put a breathing tube down into his lungs. They had to put 2 chest tubes, one on each side, to try to reinflate his lungs. They even tried proning him, which is a technique. They would rotate the entire person face down, give the lungs a chance to expand more from the backside. That didn't help. Then, of course, he's not eating. He's losing massive amounts of weight because the body is fighting and burning every single calorie it can get a hold of. They put a feeding tube in him. They found an interventional pulmonologist in New Orleans that agreed to accept Zack to attempt to put these valves in. And his heart stopped during the procedure. Apparently, one of the holes in his lungs opened up, pushed enough air up against his heart to make it stop. They put a chest tube in. They performed CPR. They got his heart back. They fought 3 hours to get his, trying to get his oxygen level up above 60%. It wouldn't never stay. The interventional pulmonologist, went in, he sucked out all kinds of mess out of his lungs, and he just couldn't understand why his oxygen level's not staying up. At that point, Jeannie and I knew that his brain was gone. He's not, if he lived, it'd be nothing. There would be nothing there. So we made the determination, our 19-year-old son at that time, to withdraw care. And he passed away. We were both able to be there with him holding his hand.
I didn't know Zack was in the hospital until about 2 days before he passed. Me and one of my other friends was planning on visiting him. And I remember we were sitting there one morning watching this movie on Netflix, and just looking through social media, one of our friends said, "Can't believe you're gone." And from that point, we didn't talk for an hour. We just kind of sat, cried together. Remember, I actually, I had a vape on me when I heard that, and I was like, went to the trash can, just like hummed it. kind of broke down a little bit. And yeah, that was some of the hardest news to hear. Somebody my age, older than me, who I'm older than now. That was very tough.
It was a shock. We were at the restaurant, and a bunch of us were sitting around a table taking a break. And my mom was there, and she loved Zack like her own too. And when she called, it was just such a shock, you know, just screamed. I could just remember everybody was just devastated. We closed down the restaurant, and that was it.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Zack. Happy birthday to you.
They put nicotine in the vaping devices on purpose to get you to be addicted or physically dependent. Those things are a little bit different. Physical dependence means that when you stop using that substance, you will have withdrawal symptoms. Addiction is the definition that says you know that you have withdrawal symptoms and you do it anyway, that you're dependent on it, but you continue to do it knowing it's potentially harmful. We know from books like Drive by Daniel Pink and another book called The Teenage Brain that teenagers, as their brain is developing, and your brain develops until the age of 26, we do know that it's easier to imprint habits, which is why the vaping companies target, and I'm going to use the word target, they're targeting teenagers. They're targeting you at a young age to make sure they get you early. Because we also know that vaping, even at $30 a week, at $20 a week, it's about $1,000 a year, and at $30 a week, it's about $1,500 a year. They're after that money. They want to get you hooked and addicted early. And they know your brain is developing, so they're going to target you to start early so that you become a lifelong user. They want that $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 over the course of your life, regardless of the effects it has on your health. Vaping itself was made to replace so-called a safe way to smoke, but it really isn't. And unfortunately, we've learned over the years since vaping came out the dangers associated with vaping, which go way beyond the use of nicotine. I think, unfortunately, people think of cigarettes as having a lot of carcinogens in it and vaping being safe, but it truly isn't. We do know that vaping has multiple carcinogens in it. It does have multiple substances in it which can harm the lung, and therefore we're putting ourselves at risk when we vape.
Side effects of vaping has just as detrimental effects, if not more so, because of the levels of the products, nicotine in particularly, that can be added to it, the additives for flavor enhancers that can be put in it. And so all of those contributing factors and the chemicals that are released when the vaping products are heated up and what it does to our lungs.
Popcorn lung is really a term the radiologists use. It is a finding that we see on CAT scans of the lungs of people that vaped, and it's very unique to vaping. When we inhale those substances, especially the fatty part that are in those, that vaping liquid, it irritates the lung in a pattern which looks like popcorn kernels. What you're seeing there is the inflammation that occurs in the lungs. For some people, it's a minor issue, but for some people, it becomes life-threatening and unfortunately sometimes life-ending.
What you find with popcorn lung is an inflammation in the lung sacs. You can get it from the flavoring that's in e-cigarettes, such as diacetyl, which was also found in popcorn flavoring. Years back in the manufacturing plant, a lot of the workers, they became ill with lung diseases. 4 of them had to actually have lung implants, and it was from the diacetyl that was found in the flavorings. Since that time, that diacetyl is not in popcorn, but it's still in the e-cigarettes. And over 60% of e-cigarettes that have fruity flavors have the diacetyl. So we're still seeing people exposed to diacetyl today.
And the popcorn that you referred to is an acute response of inflammation to the lungs. And unfortunately, we see that in some certain situations, and in Zack's situation, he had that response to those vapors and products that hit his lung fields. We also know that if you don't have the acute form, the popping of the lungs, they're starting to begin to understand the chronic effects of vaping on the lungs. And so we're going to find out, I believe, from a medical standpoint, that the detrimental effects of vaping that it has on the lungs is not going to be a good thing down the road. And the early studies are starting to show that.
So when people vape and they inhale the vape, they feel a burning sensation in their throat. That is one of the symptoms. Also, a feeling of suffocation. That's definitely one of the symptoms of vape use. And some of the chemicals that, when they're heated, they become carcinogenic, such as formaldehyde, which we know is used to embalm dead people. And so that is one of the chemicals that is in vape that causes issues and is cancer causing. There's no oxygen that gets to the body. There's no nutrients that get to the body because it just becomes rotten flesh.
Deaths, although a small percentage, are still a risk that are out there. We know from some studies that we've seen, just in Louisiana, we've seen as many as 49 vaping deaths since vaping became sort of prevalent in the early 2010s to 2015s. We've seen an increased number of people using vaping products as people have either switched from tobacco, or we've seen the youth in our area especially pick up vaping. And as those numbers go up, we've seen the number of people with vaping injuries come in and be affected. We do know from studies in Wisconsin alone, in Illinois, there were 53 cases, of which there were multiple deaths associated with that. We know from other studies that vaping liquid is harmful and has caused people to have multiple symptoms associated with it, not just death, but multiple symptoms associated with their lung, including type of pneumonia, an inflammatory pneumonia, not an infectious pneumonia, but an inflammatory pneumonia that we call vape lung. Unfortunately, it has a high mortality rate associated with vape lung.
For the rest of Zack's life, if he lived, his lungs were so bad, he would have been on a home ventilator, in a hospital bed, in his room, bedbound, with us having to take care of him. He would have been suffering from skin breakdown at some point. He would have probably had multiple bouts of pneumonia that could take his life at any minute. He would have had to have us clean him up, give him baths, take care of his bodily functions for him, feed him. He's been totally dependent on us.
What I would say about vaping is that you're taking a risk every time you take a puff on that vape, because you don't know what it's going to do your insides. And unfortunately, like Zack, it was unrepairable.
My advice is you're going to get sick. Your friends are going to get sick. And then before y'all get to do things y'all want to do, you'll die. And that's straight up facts.
We were told a story. I didn't hear it until after Zack passed, that one night at the hospital, I don't think me or Ricky were there, he had a conversation with, I don't know if it was a nurse practitioner, a doctor, a nurse, or whatever, and Zack said, "I messed up." And they said, "Yes, you did." So I'm sure he would want me to go on so nobody else messes up. Sure. So he would want me to be an advocate, so he could say, "Mom, do that so nobody else messes up."